Chapter 1: The Rider, the Horse, and the Critic. Why your internal civil war feels so detached, and how to take the reins back. Have you ever sat staring at your ceiling at 2 a.m., completely exhausted, furious at yourself because you promised you wouldn't give in to that old habit today, but you did anyway? You ask yourself, why do I keep doing things I know are bad for me? Am I broken? Do I just lack willpower? For decades, I heard my own struggles described in cold, clinical terms: addictive personality, maladaptive coping mechanisms, ego defense malfunctions. Those labels have their place, and the professionals who use them helped me. But for me, hearing my life described that way could also feel strangely detached, like my struggle was a faulty fuel injector buried somewhere inside the engine, separate from who I actually was. It was easy to slide into being a passive observer of my own pain, waiting for someone else to read a blueprint I assumed I could never understand. But it was never supposed to be that way. When the map of the mind was first drawn, it wasn't written for doctors. It was written in plain, unvarnished human language designed to help you look in the mirror and say, I see exactly what's happening to me. To understand why I sabotage myself, I had to strip away the clinical jargon and look at the raw, three-way civil war raging inside my head. Act 1: The three voices in your head. When Sigmund Freud first mapped out our internal struggles, he didn't use elite, clinical Latin terms. He used simple, everyday pronouns that any regular person would use at the kitchen table. He pointed out that your mind is constantly being pulled in three directions by three distinct voices. The beast, originally das, the it. This is the raw, animalistic wilderness inside you. It operates entirely on a child's logic. I want comfort, and I want it right now. The beast doesn't care about your mortgage, your marriage, your fitness goals, or tomorrow morning's alarm. It doesn't process time, logic, or consequences. When you are stressed, lonely, or completely overwhelmed, the beast doesn't whisper a complex plan. It simply screams for a quick escape, whether that's a drink, a screen to scroll through, or a box of junk food. It is a blind, burning furnace of survival energy. You, originally, das Ich, the I. This is the person listening right now, your conscious identity, your logic, your awareness. In psychology, this was Latinized into the word ego, which we now casually mistake for arrogance. But in reality, your ego is just you. You are not an all-powerful king ruling over your mind. You are a middle manager trying to navigate reality. Freud used a brilliant analogy that every person who has ever struggled with an impulse understands in their bones. You are a rider sitting on top of a massive 1,200-pound runaway horse. You supply the logic, and you get to look ahead and try to steer, but the horse supplies the raw power. If that horse gets spooked, stressed, or desperately thirsty, it takes an immense amount of conscious energy to hold the reins. All too often, the exhausted rider simply gets dragged wherever the horse wants to go. The critic, originally das Über-Ich, the over-I. This is the internalized supervisor sitting above you, watching your every move. It is the voice that says, you should be further along in life by now, or how could you mess up again? The critic is built from every rule, expectation, and judgment poured into you by your parents, your culture, and your past mistakes. It doesn't practice empathy. It holds an impossible standard of perfection. When you fail to handle the horse, the critic doesn't help you stand up. It beats you over the head with intense shame and worthlessness. Act 2: The Anatomy of a Relapse. Let's look at how this civil war plays out in real life so you can spot the trap before it springs. Imagine a brutal high-stress Tuesday. You've been making hard decisions all day at work. Your cognitive energy is completely drained, and you walk through your front door. The beast feels the stress and immediately demands an escape. Numb it out. Grab a drink. Let's slide into the old comfort zone. The critic instantly fires back with a preemptive strike. Don't you dare. You promised you were changing. If you screw up tonight, you're a complete failure. You, the rider, are caught right in the middle, physically exhausted, trying to hold the reins of a screaming horse while your passenger screams that you're a terrible driver. This is the exact moment when the system breaks down. Willpower is a finite resource. Because you are exhausted from fighting the critic and fighting the day, your hands slip on the reins. The horse bolts into the woods toward the chemical comfort it knows so well. The moment the drink hits your system, the beast gets exactly what it wants: instant relief. The horse stops bucking, but an hour later, as the chemical numbing wears off, the critic wakes up with a vengeance. Look what you did. You're hopeless. You'll never change. And the cycle of shame resets for tomorrow. Act 3, the Latin betrayal. If this internal struggle is so human, why does the language around it so often feel complicated and far away? Part of the answer is historical. A century ago, as science professionalized, everyday words got translated into clinical ones. That translation gave us real medical understanding I'm grateful for, and it also, for a lot of us, put a pane of glass between the person and their own experience. When these concepts were translated into English, the translators, James Strachey foremost among them, set aside the plain words, the it, the I, and the over-I, and wrapped them in cold, clinical Latin, id, ego, and superego. For me, that shift created something I think of as clinical distance. When my struggle was described as an ego suffering from a structural deficit in managing the impulses of the id, my brain treated it like an abstract puzzle belonging to someone else. Getting a specialist involved was exactly the right move. I needed one. The problem wasn't the specialist, it was that the language left me feeling like a passive observer of my own life, a spectator rather than a participant in my recovery. But if we use the uncorrupted, real language, the truth hits you right in the chest. Your I is completely exhausted. You've lost control of your it, and your over-I is terrorizing you with shame. That doesn't make the disease any less real. Alcoholism is a serious medical condition, and I'll never tell you otherwise, or tell you to skip the doctors and the professionals who saved my life too. What this framing did for me was give me a second handle to grab. Alongside the medical reality, I could also see my struggle as a design problem, not a mysterious flaw I had to wait passively to be cured of, but a system I could start to understand and, with help, learn to operate as a stronger, steadier rider. Act 4, the arrogance illusion. This translation error is exactly why our culture completely misunderstood what a big ego means. In everyday casual slang, if we say someone has a big ego, we mean they are arrogant, loud, self-centered, and full of pride. But in the actual architecture of the mind, arrogance is not a sign of a strong ego. It is the ultimate proof of a fragile one. When someone projects an image of utter superiority, or when an individual trapped in a destructive loop acts like they have everything under control and don't need help, that isn't a big I. That is a tiny, terrified rider who is being dragged through the mud by a runaway horse, using a loud, aggressive mask to hide the fact that they have completely lost the reins. A truly strong I, a healthy ego, is a rider who can sit on that horse, look at reality completely unvarnished, and say without shame, "The horse is wild today, the road is incredibly muddy, and I need to change my strategy if I'm going to make it home." A note, this is personal memoir, not medical advice. I'm not a doctor or licensed clinician, and nothing here is a diagnosis, treatment, or cure, only an account of what worked for me. Alcoholism is a serious medical disease that deserves professional care. Please don't use anything I say to delay or replace real treatment. If you're struggling, talk to a licensed professional. In the U.S., call or text 988, Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or 1-800-662-4357, SAMHSA, both free, confidential, and 24/7.